All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back on that ish with creator of the show, Issue X, otherwise known as Ish, the voice of controversy and the voice of many different subject matters, including writing, politics, comics, martial arts, and etc. And of course, there's myself, Flavius, activist Maximus.
Always the voice of reason, always insightful.
All right, we're back on that ish.
So, folks, we're gonna get right into it, and what we're gonna cover today is, something that came up in a previous show that I wanted to expound upon, and it's just this notion of who is responsible for educating people who don't come from marginalized groups on the plights of marginalized people. And you get this sense that it isn't the responsibility of people who come from marginalized groups to educate people who don't come from those groups on their various plights. So I have contention with that. And this is something we talked about, Mike, or Flav. I feel like as a member of a so-called marginalized group, I certainly have some part of the responsibility of educating those who are willing to be educated. Now, I'm going to restate like I did previously. You have to be wary of intent, right? From my perspective, if you're dealing with somebody who has questions for the purposes of arguing your answers, well, obviously it's not my responsibility to educate you.
Sure.
But if I'm talking to somebody who has a genuine concern and altruistic willingness to learn and understand these things, then at some point I have to be able to build bridges as opposed to burn bridges. I said, I could direct you to a book, but I also don't want to put you in a catch-22 situation where you feel like, or you can say something like, well, I know about these group of people because I read the book on it, right? Mm-hmm. Which is obviously no one is going to be received if they say something like that. So like, where do we draw the line? Where do we, draw the line between the responsibility of someone who doesn't come from a marginalized group to go out of their way to educate themselves and the responsibility of the people in that marginalized group? What is their responsibility, if any, in that, our responsibility, if any, in that educational process?
So
personally,
for instance, this would be in response to a Black person saying to a white person who wants to know about Black culture, who wants to know about maybe negative things that are impacting the Black community, how they can figure out what's going on, or they're asking, hey, like, what is this, or what is that affecting the Black community, or what is this term? And you say, look, we're going through it. It's not my responsibility to educate you on Black issues, right? You should educate yourself, that kind of thing.
Right. Exactly. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, what is your position on that?
I have some similar thoughts to you. My feeling is this: if you, as an individual, have the bandwidth and the patience, the willingness and the desire to teach, then go ahead and do so, because we can then take some of the weight, off of some of our sisters, grandmothers, etc., who maybe have been doing the heavy lifting. So we can go ahead and do that. If the next person feels that there's too much trauma, or there's too much expectation of them to go around teaching white people about white privilege, stuff that they, could have figured out some years ago, teaching white folks about white fragility, teaching folks who say, no, I grew up poor. I don't have white privilege. I don't know what you're talking about. No, I'm a part of another marginalized group. I can't have white privilege. You may feel that you don't have the bandwidth to teach those folks, but if the next person does, then go ahead and do that so you can take the pressure off of people who don't, because we're not a monolith. And we do want to push folks in the right direction so they don't have, maybe another excuse to find the wrong information, right? Maybe it's good for them to get a diversity of voices. Hopefully there's some consistency, but, better that they get it from us than they get it from, some Candace Owens or something, or some talking head on Fox News who claims to be with the culture and is leading people astray. So not everyone's going to have the same bandwidth, but if you do, then go ahead and take that responsibility a little bit. But we feel like you said, if the intent is wrong or people are trying to argue you down or just don't understand, you feel like you need a break, then go ahead and take that break. There are white groups of people who understand this stuff and who actually will take on their shoulders. Even on Facebook, you can at them on Facebook and they'll tag team in and they'll make the explanation for you, because they don't feel like, as a person of color or as a black person, you have to go around explaining yourself or teaching white people all the time. You can tag these people and they have some kind of name like, let a white person explain to a white person, or some kind of name like that.
Really?
You can add them, and
really?
they will hop in for you and do the explaining.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Now, with what type of energy are they operating with?
I mean, they're coming with the right energy. They're coming with the, they're on the right page.
Okay. Now you said some things, right? You mentioned trying to keep my train of thought here. You mentioned you kind of mentioned it from a perspective of almost a devil's advocate perspective, some of the scenarios that you painted.
Okay.
Especially when one of the things that kind of caught my attention was when you said, some things that they should have been able to figure out a long time ago. Uh-huh. So that's not really the class of people that I'm talking about when we talk about education, for me, from what I'm talking about. Okay. Like, I'm just talking about someone who, again, weary of intent, right? So I'm talking about someone who genuinely just wants to understand. And I want to say, I had a conversation previously and I said, first of all, the goal is not to get it, because you're never going to get it if you're not a marginalized person, right? Okay. The goal is to understand that you don't get it.
Okay.
Right? To understand that you're never really going to get it. I don't expect people to go out of their way and, go on a lifelong study of a particular marginalized group to try to fully understand it. What I do expect is for people to understand when they encounter situations that there are things that they don't understand, that they don't know what they don't know, and that, they can recognize these situations and be willing to listen, and at the very least be empathetic. In that process, I recognize that I have some responsibility to just those people. I don't have so education is a two-way street, right? It's definitely a two-way street. And for me, it's, again, about building bridges. I want to build bridges. I think dialogue is important. I think, especially as it concerns the identity groups that comprise, the liberal party or Democratic Party or the left, I think dialogue is really important. We need to be able to talk to each other, to understand each other, especially those people that call themselves our allies or that we look to and accept as allies. We need to absolutely be able to have a dialogue with each other. We need to be willing to educate. We just need to be willing to. And again, I agree with you, right? Like that shouldn't be the task of every person within a specific marginalized group. You certainly have teachers. You certainly have people that are called to different types of action, different levels of activity within, any given situation. But
Right.
I definitely think that we need representatives and people who are willing to recognize that, well, yeah, while the onus of the responsibility isn't on us, we certainly have we certainly have a part of that responsibility.
Right.
Like
What about pushing people to writers and people in the community who are teachers, like pushing white folks to people like Sean King or people like what's his name, the writer of The Atlantic, also a Black Panther writer. What's his name? We spoke about him the other day. He's got an interesting name that's pronounced a little bit differently. He was a writer of the Black Panther that you mentioned. Maybe isn't used to writing comic books.
Oh, Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Oh yeah, Ta-Nehisi Coates. People in the community who are teachers, are writers of the culture, and who write on this stuff well. Is it, how do you feel about just saying, hey, this is an author that can break it down for you well, and this is someone who's wrote about these cultural issues that has some respect, and there's some consent in the community that this is some good information that a lot of folks agree with.
So I think those things are well and good. I think they're valuable resources, and I think that the people are instrumental to our culture and certainly proliferating, the message, or at least the messages that we like to present. However, I think something can be said about groundwork, right? Like bottom level education as well. Like the type of education you get from the layman, from the person who just lived on the street or lived in the hood or came up on the block, or actually can transmit a relatable experience because I know you. Right. You understand what I'm saying? Like I know you.
Sure.
I may not be able to necessarily ask this author a nuanced question.
Okay. But so that might be like homework after class or something.
Right. Or even before class or during class.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem if somebody is reading a book on my culture and they call me up and say, hey, Ish, I just read this. I don't really understand it. Or, can you put it in another perspective? Or, is there a bigger scope that I'm missing? Or I don't have a problem, having that conversation. I don't have a problem having a conversation with someone who hasn't read the book or a book. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If someone that I know personally comes to me and says, hey, Ish, can we have a conversation? I've really been thinking about these things. I feel like there are some things that I don't get, and that I feel like I have a responsibility to learn and to try and understand and be willing to listen. Then I, in turn, feel like, sure, I'll break that bread with you. Let's have a conversation.
Yeah.
Again, it's about building bridges. I don't want to build a wall. I don't want to let self-righteousness create a divide. You understand what I'm saying? Like, I don't want to become so self-righteous that I further, I instead of bridging a gap, I increase the distance between one cliff and another.
Uh-huh. Sure.
I don't want to leave people feeling helpless in their intention to learn and to help.
Yeah.
And so I just want to be aware when there is a line that I can erase as opposed to darken or make heavier, or you understand what I'm saying? I want to
Sure.
be aware and recognize, okay, here's a line I can erase.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, there are other instances where white people are like, what can I do to help? You know, and it's kind of a similar situation. You know, some people are like, well, why are you asking me? You know, it's like, well, I want to know, like, as a white person who admits that they have privilege, what is the best way that I can help? You know, should I
entertain those questions.
Yeah.
Like, I'm never going to be like, why ask me? My answer is, I need you to use your privilege where I can.
Right. Sure.
That's always my answer.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, before anyone asked me the question, I got on Facebook. You saw me.
Yep.
And said as much. When do you use your privilege that you know you have? I'm talking about my allies. When do you use it? Listen, you don't even have to come to me and ask me. But if you do, I have an answer for you.
Right.
There are people that you need to be talking to. You need to talk to people like me who are willing to have these conversations with you. And then you need to take this information and you need to couple it with the privilege that you have. And you need to go to people that look like you and you need to have conversations. And if they're not willing to have conversations, then in other instances, you need to be prepared to be corrective. You understand what I'm saying? I just told somebody today who, you know, we were having this discussion today. He stopped at my house, surprisingly. And he said, man, the walls you're talking about, you know, being afraid to build have always been there. And I said, yeah, but that's the problem. And he goes, you know, oftentimes, you know, white people get rejected. They'll come over to our side of the fence and be like, yeah, I feel your cause. I want to fight with you. And we will reject them. And I said, you know, what it's about is we're in the same army. We're just not in the same platoon. But we absolutely, our leaders have to meet in the middle and they have to create a battle plan.
Yeah.
Right? You meet in the middle, you create a battle plan. This is your task. This is my task. Your platoon goes out and you this is what you carry out. This is your strategy. This is what you do. This is your mission. My platoon goes out and my platoon handles our mission. But we certainly have to meet in the middle. We have to exchange information and develop a strategy together.
Right.
You know, I've often said that the way that black people fight oppression and the way that white people fight oppression can't be the same.
Sure.
Because we're not using the same tools.
Sure. We don't have the same defenses, right?
Right. We can't have the same strategy.
Sure.
That doesn't mean that we can't work together, that we're not a part of the same army.
Sure.
We're just different platoons with different missions, a different strategy, same goal.
Right. So this is when my mind goes back to, you know, when Eamon Bundy wakes up and says, you know, I believe in BLM. You know, the white gentleman who was in the standoff with the government a few years back over, you know, on the ranch, you know, somewhere in the, I guess, mid to west coast on a ranch, you know, basically in a standoff for a couple of weeks, who they finally stood down. I mean, this is a person in a group who's allowed to have weapons on them, allowed to point their weapons at the police and be given the utmost amount of grace and not shot down for their actions. So now that one of their folks, acknowledges we have some commonalities. I should say because he acknowledged some of his buddies aren't there yet, but he agrees with BLM in their struggle, including he agrees with defunding the police. How can a person like that use his privilege to stand with us so that we're not getting hurt while we're, say, protesting or maybe even while we're doing our everyday activities,
By tailor making his message to account for exactly the things that he says he now stands for. Because he didn't, what he's doing, if, and we just had this conversation the other day, and I'm going to remain consistent and I'm going to stand on my position on that. If he's being altruistic, right? Well, then his position is our position.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with color, right? His position is about fundamental freedoms and equalities, right? And if he espouses these things, then he espouses them for all people. So it isn't really about color, which is why he's able to come to his conclusions.
Mm-hmm.
Color is secondary to him, right?
Yeah.
It's really about the principles that he believes to be true and is willing to fight for. So if he's altruistic and genuinely stands on those principles, then those principles apply for all people. So what he then needs to do is just tailor make his message to account for the people that he says he now stands with.
Right.
He needs to promote it to people that look like him.
Sure.
You understand what I'm saying? He needs to continue to rally and to say things like, listen, if this is what we believe, then we believe it across the boards. Otherwise, we're hypocrites.
Right.
We're choosing a moral high ground to suit a tailor-made principle rather than an overarching principle.
Right, which has been the criticism of groups like the NRA, who haven't come to the aid, rescue, or defense of people like what was his name? The brother who was stopped and killed, who declared that
I think he had a Latinx name.
I'm not remembering the brother's name. Oh, Philando Castile, right?
Yeah, Philando Castile.
Philando Castile, right? Yeah. So yeah, these have been the inconsistencies with groups like the NRA.
It's not inconsistent. It is an inconsistency, but furthermore, it is a hypocrisy.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
In practice, it's hypocritical.
Yep.
I've often said, if you have an altruistic principle, it's not altruistic if it doesn't apply across the boards in any situation where that principle is relevant, right? It's not altruism if you encounter something, if you're not willing to change based upon encountering a truth that goes against what you have known to be true or what you have believed. It's no longer altruistic. When you pursue altruistic truth, you have to take into account and accept the things that go against what you have known to be true. You have to take into account and accept what you learn that goes against what you had believed up until that point. Or it isn't altruism. If the NRA understands that someone that doesn't meet their idea of who they should support finds themselves in a situation where they would normally rally behind that person, then their goals, their positions aren't altruistic.
Sure.
It's hypocrisy.
Yeah. Sure.
That's just what it is. But on topic, right? And I guess we are on topic, but I just feel like this is just really important. It was something that I would have segued our conversation on our previous show, but I chose not to. But I definitely, and obviously my phone died at, in an opportune time, but it was something that I wanted to get into because I wholeheartedly disagreed with the prevailing sentiment just as it stood. It's not our responsibility.
Right.
Wait a minute. As someone who comes from a marginalized group, you don't feel like if an opportunity arises, you really feel scorned if somebody genuinely wants to understand and they feel comfortable enough having dialogue with you. Like, dialogue bridges gaps. Dialogue is very important. Words are power.
Sure.
Not only that, character is power. How you interact and how you deal with people can fundamentally change people. And this is profound because people, for the most part, don't change. It usually takes something traumatic or dramatic to inspire people to change.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying? And then, you get these profound moments where just your character may impact someone in a certain way.
People are ready to receive. People are ready to receive a profound message that can spark a change, and then you might shut them down and be like, that's not my responsibility.
Right. And you were seeing it a lot in 2020. So you always have to find something good amongst the bad.
Right.
Otherwise, you're just bogged down with bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is a positive outlook on things. You got to be able to separate the wheat from the chaff, right? And if there's just a little bit of wheat, you got wheat, right?
Yeah.
So we could go down the list of things in 2020 that are bad. I don't have to itemize it for you. I don't have to itemize it for the viewing audience, right?
Sure.
But what we're seeing amongst the unrest, amongst lockdown, amongst and it's very, 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 very profound to me. We're seeing a sort of unity that we're just not used to seeing, and I mean in action.
Right.
Not this verbal sense of unity that we've been seeing since the advent of social media.
Sure.
Where people get on Facebook and do all this emoji talk, but there's really no action behind it, right?
Right.
We're actually seeing this sense of unity where white people are willing to come out in the street and stand next to black people and say Black Lives Matter.
Right.
Say things like, when George Floyd called for his mother, he called for every mother. You know what I'm saying? Every mother in America, was to me, that was powerful.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing is people changing fundamentally. And I'm not talking about changing their beliefs, because these people would tell you they always felt this way, right?
Yeah.
They're changing their actions. You see what I'm saying? They're becoming active.
Yep. And receptive at the same time. I noticed that posts on social media had been better received and delved into and agreed with. Now, that alone is emoji talk, and it's lawn signs in your lawn that say Black Lives Matter, but in conjunction with action, it's further momentum and movement, right? When people can look at further information and delve into it and agree and kind of build on their emotion and build on their understanding of the situation. For instance, one powerful piece that I shared on social media, I don't know how long it's been now, maybe a couple of months, was a nurse's account of what George must have gone through and what that policeman must have felt as he was choking the life out of him for that, 9 minutes? And
It
it's
was a little over 8 minutes, but
a
yeah.
little over 8 minutes. It's a harrowing account of what happens to the body when it's being, deprived of its oxygen and life that way. And it's a really harrowing account because, as a non-nurse, I had no idea. The average person might say, oh, your knees on that person, you can't feel anything. But this nurse is taking you through all the things that you actually would have been able to feel as that person's life was choking out under you, and as they were, writhing in pain, and as their life was leaving their body. And it's a very powerful. I mean, most people were brought to tears reading this account, and it's like, yeah, you had to know what was happening for those 8.5 minutes. This wasn't just some random, oh, my bad, I didn't realize how much pressure I was putting on your neck. So those kind of accounts really make people think a bit more, and it kind of moves people with empathy and make them think about, what we're going through and how much power we've given over to the state to actually exercise on people. How much power we have. I always say that these folks are exercising as executioner, as judge, jury, and executioner. I mean, take these people in.
You mean they're operating as?
Operating, yes. Yeah, take these suspects, right? They're not even guilty. They're suspects. You don't even know what the deal is yet. Take these suspects in with the utmost of care, bring them in a peaceful, state, and let them be dealt with, in the system, which even then, different topic. Many of us don't even agree with the way the system's set up, but for argument's sake, don't be out there, trying to mete out justice and putting people in a position where they can really feel that pain, because you've shown that you don't have to do that. We've seen how you took in Dylan Roof, who, shot 9 or 10 black folks who invited him in to pray. And
we've seen how you mitigated the situation with what's his name, Eamon, who we were just talking about previously.
Eamon Bundy, yeah.
Yeah, we've seen how you mitigated that situation.
Yeah, they had guns.
Right.
Pointed at you.
They seized a little mini federal building.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a little shack, but
We've seen this time and time and again. We saw the naked dude who had just killed a few people, who was running around at the police, like tackling them and whatnot, and he was brought in rather unscathed. We've seen this time and again. So yeah, people are really wondering, what have we done? What kind of power have we given to folks who have shown us time and again we cannot handle this power?
It's interesting. It's interesting, and this is a little segue, but I just wanted to touch on that. One argument that I've seen and actually been presented with when having conversations with white people is, the cops kill white people too. And the reason why I thought about that is because I was actually thinking about a video I'd seen about a year ago where a white guy was choked out in a similar fashion to George Floyd, and he died. They actually put him on the cart dead. And my mind always goes to, so if your argument is white people get killed by police, are you presenting this argument to tell me that this is okay?
Exactly.
This is acceptable? It's not acceptable for anybody to be killed, you know what I mean? Yeah. White, black, Latinx, or otherwise. It's just not acceptable. And I always wonder.
You know what that tells me? When someone says that, oh, okay, so this is an even bigger problem.
Well, they're saying it because they want me to be like, well, you're overreacting, white people get killed too. And I'm like, exactly. Wait a minute. Because I'm talking about black people getting killed doesn't mean that I'm not concerned if anyone gets killed.
Yeah.
Because I am.
Yeah.
And your argument is moot.
Right. What that tells me is what they've just done is they've kind of debilitated an argument that says, oh, he must have done something wrong, or what are you doing wrong to make them do this to you? Oh, it's happening to your folks too. So this is an even wider spread problem, right?
Right. I mean, it gets worse. You know, somebody recently said to me in conversation, and, you know, people are so upset, and George Floyd was just this horrible person. And, you know, people are just so upset over it. And I'm like, yo, I don't care who George Floyd was. That has nothing to do with why he died.
Right.
He pulled a knife out on, okay. I'm not telling you that I'm cool with a man pulling a knife out on a pregnant woman or whatever it is that I don't even know all of this. I'm not saying I'm good with it. What I'm saying is I'm not good with George Floyd having a cop's knee on his neck for 8 minutes and being killed because of it.
Yeah. Or what I'm not good with is in similar situations, white folks are given the benefit of the doubt. Their histories aren't pulled into question, or their histories are actually used in their favor. Oh, he was going through a rough time. You know, he had issues, you know, et cetera, et cetera. You know, grace is given to some and not all. But it's really the egregious way that people dig up the dirt, right?
Yep.
They're already waiting.
Right.
They're already waiting. Like, how many? Oh man, I wanna like.
It's a great trick.
Curse so bad. Like, how many times have people brought marijuana into the discussion? Are you kidding me?
Listen, it's a great tactic. It's just, it is. Because it works. It gets so many people.
He was a marijuana smoker? Are you kidding me?
I mean, it just recruits so many people to that argument.
Yeah.
It plays on a sentiment, you know, you have a class of people, and it's not restricted to color.
Mm-hmm.
You have this class of people that look at a certain class of people, or not necessarily a certain class of people, right? They just have a problem with the criminal element. And there's nothing wrong with that. But when you play on that sentiment, then it's once a criminal, always a criminal, right? And then you forget your humanity and the process of making your argument based upon those principles. You just forget your humanity. Like, wait a minute, because you committed a crime. It's kind of like those people that say things like, you know, we need to have better access to needles or medication for diabetics rather than having, you know, access to or rather than giving crackheads access to some sort of treatment. And it's like, well, wait a minute, we need both.
Yeah.
Right? We need both.
Yeah.
What are you doing here? Are you saying that these people who are addicted to drugs or what have you are just lesser people?
Right.
And you're just going to conflate this issue to make an argument? Like, we need both.
Well, we've seen how times have switched up, right? Now with the opioid crisis having, you know, maybe even disproportionately affected white folks. We've seen
it impacts white people.
Yeah, I mean, it impacts our folks too, but certainly in the beginning, and certainly the perception and you know, even numbers wise, it was impacting white folks more. So it was all of this, you know, they need help, and it was just a whole different perspective. It wasn't criminalized, right? But it was help. But even non-criminally, I mean, smoking weed is often not criminal in and of itself, right? I mean, you can start digging into amounts and this and that, but just saying someone was smoking weed, that doesn't mean that they were a criminal.
I mean, for the purpose of argument, it does.
Well, it's about perception, though, right?
Yeah, but I mean, it suits an argument because in most cases they don't perceive it as such until you have a George Floyd.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you want to make a suitable argument.
Right.
Oh, now weed matters. It doesn't matter that your son is probably getting high.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah, you bring up some interesting points. Go on.
No, I mean that was it. That was kind of the thread that I was pulling on there.
I don't know. It goes back to the thing that the theme that I continue to promote. We're just hypocrites.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's especially speaking to things like digging up marijuana in people's pasts. First of all, marijuana tends to be looked on as the drug that affects marginalized people. Well, even though really everybody smokes marijuana.
Right, that's changing with this whole dispensary culture and
well my point is though is when you know, because you made an excellent point, right? When any black person is killed by a cop, marijuana is brought up as a negative thing.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't know if Dylan Roof did marijuana.
Right.
Because nobody decided to dig up and say, hey, he was smoking marijuana. And the average black person who would have discovered that in his history wouldn't have been like he was smoking weed.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? They would have been like, oh, he smoked weed. He was a horrible person.
Right.
You don't got to tell me he's a horrible person. He went to a church and killed 9 people. I know he's horrible. I don't care about all that other stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Like, he went to a church and he killed 9 people. Horrible person.
But here's the difference. I mean, with him, it wasn't like they were
I'm going dark for a second, but I'm here.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, I mean, with George Floyd, the difference was this wasn't a person that was killed, first of all. So we're not really having some kind of discussion where we're trying to defend the police for this action, right? So we don't even have.
Well, there are people trying to defend the police.
No. What I'm saying is the police didn't kill Dylan Roof. So
you're right.
You don't have to dig into whether he was a weed smoker or not, because we're not trying to defend the police for killing Dylan Roof, right? This stuff only gets brought up to defend the police when something horrible happens, or do something.
Yeah, I think I was just making a point that, and maybe he was a bad example. Like, nobody cares if the white person has a history of smoking marijuana.
Right. For sure.
That's I think the point, and maybe he was a bad example, but you know, he was the only one I could think of at the time. But that was my point: is that nobody really cares if a white person has a history of smoking marijuana.
Sure. Yeah.
Certainly, I don't think black people are going to care.
No, I mean it's ridiculous. I mean, like you said, they don't care if Johnny. Nobody cares if little Johnny is, toking on some bud, experimenting, finding himself, or whatever they call it, and Johnny does it.
And I mean, I've talked to people who literally said, I mean, this is a guy who smoked marijuana, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah, like what are you even talking about? What conversation are we having?
Yeah. Oh, he was this horrible person. So? It's the reason why we have laws. Right.
Yeah, in that case, we might as well have vigilantes going around taking out horrible people. And really, that's the bar for a horrible person? Someone who was smoking marijuana?
Oh no, they itemize his criminal history. Recently they just put out the police body cam footage. So you got a whole bunch of police apologists really getting into, and he was arguing with the police, and none of this means he should be murdered.
Yeah, arguing, huh? So we're gonna start killing people who argue, but you know what they're telling. They're kind of telling on themselves, though.
Yeah, of course.
Because that is the attitude. Don't you dare argue with me, boy. That is totally the attitude. And we've seen videos of these police turning up when they feel like they're being argued with.
I mean, it also plays into that sentiment that he should have just gotten out of the car and laid down. He invited his own death.
Right.
He should have just did what you wouldn't have done. Because it goes back to, privilege again, right?
Yeah.
You're gonna argue and I'm calling my lawyer, and you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, we've seen white folks get away with. I mean, we've seen the video. They've got those videos out there too. We've got videos of white ladies getting up in police's faces and cursing them out and like not listening to them when they say chill and like stay there and doing all types of stuff that would have gotten them shot minutes ago. Had they been black. So we've seen it.
Yeah. Black or Latinx, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
I don't think that these issues are just black people issues. And dare I say, I don't imagine that poor white people are treated much better. Certainly they do have a privilege that comes with the color of their skin, but I think that they can be looked down upon too in those situations.
Yeah, I would, I might argue over the much better sentiment, but I sure get what you're saying. I definitely agree with what you're saying.
I mean, I've certainly seen some white heroin addicts and crackheads thrown around.
Yeah. No, I totally get it. I totally get it.
I don't know. I think certainly different, depending on the police officer, the individual, they bring different prejudices to the table. And I'm even speaking about black police officers.
Oh, well, I mean, you and I already know about that.
Yeah.
I mean, you know how we scoff at the person who says, well, what about black police officers? Well, what do you mean? You think they're getting a pass in this? You and I know that they can be the worst.
That's what Ice Cube said. Ice Cube broke it down in that very famous song that I'm not going to name because of the profanity in the title, but he certainly broke it down.
Yeah.
The film Boys in the Hood certainly broke it down. I remember getting pulled over years ago. I was with a friend of mine and I was driving his car, and we were driving down Elmwood and we got pulled over. There used to be a welcome to Kenmore sign on Elmwood. It isn't there anymore.
Okay.
We got pulled over not 10 feet.
Into the welcome to Kenmore sign, right?
10 feet before.
Before
the welcome to Kenmore sign. We got pulled over by a Buffalo cop. His name was Ronnie Thunderberg. He actually grew up, him and his family came up in the projects that we were from.
Okay.
And he ran up to the car, roll the window down, cussing. He didn't just say roll the window down.
Right.
It was, some expletives leading up to window. Roll the window down, roll the window down. And when I rolled the window down, you MFers just like yelling at us.
Yeah.
And I looked at him and I said, is this normally how you pull people over? And his whole demeanor changed.
Really?
Yeah, black eye, right? He's pissed too. He was pissed. And I understood what was going on. So Rodney and I, especially when we were on the block, and we were on the block all the time, Buffalo Municipal Housing and the police used to want to know who we were. Okay. Because of how we ruled on the block. And what I mean by how we ruled is our how we carried ourselves.
Okay.
Right? We were very quiet. I wasn't flashy. Rodney wasn't flashy. You understand what I'm saying? We just weren't flashy dudes.
Yeah.
We weren't loud and outspoken, and I was doing things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was very quiet about how I handled my business because I had things to lose.
Yeah.
So I wasn't, and I never understood, like I wasn't a flashy floss type person. Never was when I was, doing dirt on the block.
Okay.
I was very business minded, focused on specific things, was never going to be drunk, never going to be belligerent. You're never going to see me on the block in handcuffs.
Okay.
It's just not how I carry myself to where, so, I mean, I was in the projects, and I was in the projects that at one point in time was particularly famous, meaning it was small, but they used to come and take our pictures. And cars would be published in the newspaper, and it'd say things like, this is one of the vehicles used in one of the biggest dope operations in the city, and things like that, literally published in Buffalo newspaper. So the cops wanted to know who we were. They kind of knew who everyone else was. They just didn't know who we were, because
Okay.
we weren't loud and we weren't flashy, but they'd see us on the block. There was a time when we got pulled over every other day for about 2 weeks. We'd leave the projects, we get pulled over. Well, this is the beginning of it, right? So we get pulled over. They'd see a black and mild and be like, it smells like someone smoking weed, and then just search us.
Yeah.
Things like that, because they wanted to know who we were. So he pulled us over, and he's screaming, "You MFers, da 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 da." And I just said to him, I'm like, is this just normally how you pull people over? I'm not in the projects, I'm on Elmwood. And his demeanor changed. And he's like, if you guys don't want to be pulled over, you need to. And I'm like, at the time I was young, and I probably should have just kept my mouth shut, but I didn't get it. Like, I have a license. We're just driving. Why did you pull us over? Why are you talking to me this way? And, this happened some years later too, right? I was literally taking a friend of mine to Save a Lot to buy some groceries, an older woman. And I must have, talking to her, not paid attention, and either turned I did something. Didn't put a signal on, I did something. So the cop pulls me over in the parking lot, black guy. And normally I'm very cordial. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to take any more time than necessary to do what it is that for you to do what it is that needs to be done. So I'm going about my business. But in this particular case, I felt some type of way, because when he came to my window, he asked me for my license, and I gave him my license and registration. And he said to me, so when I run this license, it's going to come back valid, right? And, you could assume as a black cop, he was probably asking me so that if it didn't come back valid, he wouldn't even run it to kind of give me a break. But that wasn't the energy he was projecting.
Okay.
He was projecting this energy like he expected my license not to be valid.
Right.
So he kept asking me. He's like, yo, if you're lying to me, I didn't understand this. Like, I'm a grown man. I'm not a kid.
Yeah.
You just pulled me over in a parking lot. You asked me for my license. If you pulled over somebody that didn't look like me, would you be asking them 5 times if their license is valid?
No way.
And I got frustrated. I'm like, yo, man, could you just go run my license? Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah. Which you had every right to.
Yeah, I was getting frustrated. And, my friend, her name was Phoenix. She's like, it's just chill, because she's very wary of how cops can act towards black people. She's white.
Yeah.
An older woman. And I'm like, no, I'm not chilling. he's trying to relate. He's like, we're probably about the same age. And when he saw my license, he's like, oh, no, I'm older than you. Like, dude, I'm a grown man. I'm not some kid. Right? When you pull me over and you ask me for my license, I expect that the protocol is I give you my license, you run my license. If it's not valid, you find out, I get in trouble.
Right.
What are we doing here? This is just another experience that I had with black cops where, I can tell you another one.
Well, let's for a second, let's step back for a second. Even if there is something wrong with your license and you're a white person, it's not that much of a problem either, right?
Right.
It really isn't.
Right.
So whatever paperwork is involved happens and you get your license back and it's like, take care of that.
Right. But I think he profiled and stereotyped me.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
And his conclusion was, I'm a black guy. There's a high probability that my license is invalid.
Yeah.
Which just sucks. That's not something I get questioned when a white cop pulls me over.
Okay.
I mean, I have other worries, for sure. But when they pull me over, they're not going to be like, is your license valid?
Right.
They're going to go run my license, hoping it's not valid.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that was interesting. I remember one time recently, like within the past 2 years, I got pulled over at like 2 a.m. by a female, a black cop, a woman. She pulled me over because I made a wrong. So I was in Delaware Park, just chilling. It's like 2 a.m. I normally will just go out and walk a couple miles at night. And this particular time I decided to drive. So I went for a drive, pulled in Delaware Park, chilled for a minute, maybe 10, 15 minutes. So I go to turn out of Delaware Park and I go to make a left and I forgot, like you can't make a left coming out of the area of Delaware, out of the exit from Delaware Park that I was coming out of, but I'm halfway making the left. So I back up and I make a right and I cross the expressway into, is that Canisius right there? Canisius or Madai, one of the two. I think it's Canisius. So I just drive right across the expressway into Canisius parking lot and turn around. And as I'm turning around, police pulls up. And I already know why you're pulling me over. Like, I already get it. You just saw me go to make a left into traffic where I couldn't make a left, back up and make the right. So my normal protocol is when I get pulled over, I immediately grab my license and registration. So as soon as you come to the window and I roll the window down, I have my license and registration ready for you.
Right.
I'm not about to be reaching in the glove. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm not none of that. Like, it's accessible. Here it is. I don't even carry my license in my pocket. 9 out of 10 times my license stays in the cubby hole, in my car, so that I can just pick up my license. So, black woman, great experience. She walks up to the car. She's like, do you know why I'm pulling you over? And I said, yep. And she's like, and I had my license and registration ready and handed it to her. And she goes, why do you think I'm pulling you over? And I said, well, I was leaving the park and I went to make a left into traffic, realized that I couldn't make a left, backed up and made the right. And she was like, okay. And she was like, all right, I get it. Handed me my license and registration back and was like, have a good night. I think she recognized, like, I'm a black woman, I'm a police officer. I understand what this black man may be thinking, even though I wasn't thinking that, because I don't break the law. Right?
Yeah.
I certainly wasn't thinking I was about to get in any trouble for what I did.
Sure.
I wasn't drunk.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I wasn't smoking any weed. Hadn't broken the law. So, but if I'm putting myself in her shoes, I'm thinking she must have thought, like, why do I want to make this guy have a bad day for no reason, right?
Yeah.
She didn't even run my license.
Right.
He just was like, okay, handed it right back to me. But I think it helped that when she walked up to the window, I had my license and registration ready for her. So I think in her mind, like if it were me, I'd be thinking, huh, this person clearly probably thinks that they didn't, you know what I mean? That, they're not in any real trouble because,
Yeah.
I'm not ready to hassle you at all.
Right.
I know why you pulled me over.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, who knows? I mean, who knows what, the fact that she was cool, but the fact that you were kind of made things a little bit easier for her by being ready and by being honest, by like not pretending like you didn't know what you did wrong and all of that. Might have been a combination of things. And maybe she recognized like she knows where she's at and she knows how it is. And maybe she recognized like here's a person who clearly has probably been through it and is trying to make it easy on himself. Like let me do my part too. Who knows?
Right. Right. And that doesn't mean that, again, I'm not making an exoneration. I'm not saying that because you said something important there. Let me do my part. This is something, a conversation I have with my wife, right? Because my wife has never broken a law in her life. She's never been in legal trouble in her life. So if she gets pulled over, my wife is very much a jerk.
Okay.
And I'm always telling her, I'm like, listen, sweetheart, you don't have to make it so difficult. Right. No, I deserve, well, yeah, but I'm of the frame of mind. If I'm in the right, I don't need to know why you pulled me over. That doesn't mean that this isn't, that black people just don't get pulled over for no reason and that very dangerous things can happen to us as a result. This is not what I'm saying, right? What I'm saying is that I assume that I'm driving away. I'm cautious and I'm also alert and I'm very cognizant of remaining safe throughout the process. Mm-hmm. But my assumption is if I do my part in these situations, have my license and registration ready, mm-hmm. right? I don't want to have an argument with you. I don't even want to talk to you if I don't have to.
Sure.
I don't want to make your day any worse than I expect you to make my day any worse.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? So
sure.
For me, and I tell her, license or registration. Why are they pulling me over? You don't need to know why they're pulling you over. They're going to tell you. If they don't tell you, it's because they're jerks and they were idiots and it was shady. Just as long as we drive away.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying? Just as long as we drive away. They can't ask us to get out of the car if we don't give them reason to, right? Give them your license and registration. Your license and registration are going to come back above board. They've now lost any reason to be like, can you step out of the car?
Right.
You're not drunk. You're not driving in such a way that, again, this doesn't take away. I'm not jaded, right? I'm not living in a world where I don't realize what happens 7, 8, 9 out of 10 times in situations like these. Like I'm not jaded at all. I'm speaking anecdotal experiences and ways that I use to avoid situations when and where I can that could turn into something that, we fear.
Yeah.
That we know to be true. I'm not out here trying to paint a picture that if you do this, that this is the result when dealing with the police officers as black people in America.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all about mitigating the circumstances, right?
Right.
We're not taking the blame saying these things are happening because we did this or that, but we're going to...
Right. That's absolutely not what I'm doing.
You're going to try to treat the police in such a way that they have one less excuse, right?
Yep.
That's all. It's still not our fault, but we want to put ourselves in a situation where we're more than likely to not go through it.
Right. And that's what I tell her. Like, listen, we have all these rights. We have a right to question these things. However, at what point does this right to question these things come from pride? And I'm speaking again, and I'm glad you said what you said, because I want to co-sign that, and I want to re-emphasize. I don't want to re-emphasize that. I want to make sure that what you said speaks to what I'm saying, because I'm, again, not exonerating, you understand, or making an excuse, or putting the blame on ourselves for why we go through these situations. I'm not doing that. What I'm saying is, and this comes from my personal opinion, right? I'm the type of person that if I'm at your house and there's a group of people at your house and something comes up missing, if I'm not guilty, I don't need to defend myself.
Right.
And I'm just not going to do it because I didn't steal the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I'm not even going to defend. I don't have a reason to defend myself.
Yeah.
I'm not guilty of that offense, so I'm not going to defend what I'm not guilty of. This is how I operate in a lot of situations in life. If I get pulled over by the police, 9 out of 10 times I'm not guilty of a thing. And if I am guilty of a thing, then I can see what I'm guilty of. I was speeding. I ran through that stop sign, whatever the case may be, right? I don't have drugs in the car. My license is above board. You understand what I'm saying? So these things I know that I'm not guilty of. So I'm not going to act like I'm guilty. I also know that given an ideal situation, you're going to tell me why you pulled me over. It doesn't mean that you're not pulling me over some stupid, shady reason.
Right.
That's not what I'm saying. That we don't get pulled over because we're black, because we do. Right? There was a time period in Buffalo where they literally pulled people over who wore fitted hats and jerseys because that was the profile of a drug dealer.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I'm not ignorant of these things. I'm not sitting here jaded. I'm just saying the way that I operate, I have an expectation that you are going to tell me why you pulled me over. Even if it's something dumb like I've been pulled over because I was going 36 in a 30. Even got a ticket for it. Even got pulled out of the car and had my car searched. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because I was going 36 in a 30. So, yeah, these things happen quite often. Everybody has a bad experience with police officers. We're
Sure.
not saying that this isn't, the rule, so to speak. What I'm saying is that there can be exceptions, and the exceptions come from how you carry yourself. Not that you're to blame from not carrying yourself a certain way. Again, I'm speaking to my personal beliefs about how I carry myself. I don't carry myself as if I have a reason to be arrested. And I have to keep saying this. That doesn't mean that because you carry yourself that way that you won't get killed by a cop.
Sure.
That you won't be unjustly mistreated by a cop. What I'm saying is, especially in speaking with my wife, because I want my wife to come home. You understand what I'm saying? I want her to come home. I don't want her to have to be done unjustly dealing with cops. And unfortunately, and there's nothing that she can do, in my opinion, that would merit her being treated unjustly by cops. But if there are things that she can do to mitigate the instances where she could, I'd like to encourage her to do so.
For sure.